afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dan Dix here, reporting for Press for Truth. And today we're going to take a look back at some of the biggest stories of 2014. Now, it has certainly been a crazy and exciting 2014 for Press for Truth. Oppressive attempts to silence us this year were carried out by multiple agents of the various tentacles of the state. I was kicked out of CPAC for merely attempting to ask Newt Gingrich a question, and I was also arrested and detained in Copenhagen, Denmark, along with my friend Luke Rudkowski, for confronting the globalist Bilderbergers themselves. Now, on a brighter note, we relaunched our website this year. We also relocated to Vancouver, British Columbia, and will soon be entering our very own studio that we're currently building from the ground up. But what happened this year in Canada and also around the world? Well, here are the top 10 stories that made the headlines in 2014. Number 10, the missing Malaysian airplane. The disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 with 239 people on board was the big news in March. Traveling from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, this flight just mysteriously disappeared. The plane still hasn't been found, and not even a single piece of wreckage has been found. Spooky to say the least. Now, there's all kinds of theories as to what happened, but perhaps the most interesting is that the US is playing war games with the Chinese. And in this instance, they used their advanced weaponry to literally make a plane completely disappear. Of course, there are other theories, such as Malaysia's criticism of Israel or their support for 9/11 truth. But whatever the truth is, the fact that no wreckage has yet been found only completely adds to this mystery. Number 9, Ukraine and Russia. A Malaysian airplane was shot down over Ukraine, and without a shred of evidence, the Anglo-American empire blamed Putin right off the bat. Now, along with the controlled corporate state media, 2014 marked the beginning of a new Cold War. Of course, if you listen to the Western sources, they'll tell you that Russia invaded Crimea and that's what started this conflict. But in reality, the US spent $5 billion for a regime change in Ukraine, and despite encroaching on Russia's borders, somehow Russia is supposed to be the aggressor in this situation. Crimea had a referendum where 96% voted in favor of joining Russia, and yet the referendum was denounced by Western leaders. Now, some may fear a nuclear war between Russia and the US, but I'm not too worried about that because the US is pretty much broke, and Russia's economy certainly isn't doing well either. Of course, stagnating economies may increase the chances of war, as part of this fallacy that war is good for the economy. But if history is any kind of indicator, well, it's hard to go to war when you're massively in debt. In 2015, I do imagine we're going to continue to see this Cold War mentality play out. But unlike in the 20th century, the wealth will be originating out of the East, while the US economy continues to just completely deteriorate. Number 8, Canada and China. Prime Minister Stephen Harper signed a treaty with China that will see the further erosion of Canadian sovereignty. And this is thanks to the Canada-China Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement. Because of this, China can now sue Canada in secret tribunals to repeal laws and regulations that interfere with their investments. And furthermore, as was revealed by an Access to Information Act request, the Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Pallose was at Bilderberg this year talking about using the RMB as a replacement for the dollar. The Bank of Canada has also released press releases indicating closer ties with China. So as we enter 2015, the American dollar is looking less appealing as the world's reserve currency. But instead of returning to some kind of a gold standard, the powers that be wish to make China the world's superpower. Well, this is a very frightening scenario since China's bubble economy has created an artificial demand for Canada's resources. Not to mention the country is still controlled by the Communist Party, And although the American system is becoming more dictatorial every day, the US is at least still freer than China, for the most part anyways. Number 7, an injunction for medical cannabis patients. In 2012, the Harper government started the process of overhauling Canada's medical marijuana system. And on April 1st, 2014, the new regulations were in place. All home gardens were to be outlawed, and medical patients were going to be forced to have to buy from crony capitalists. Well, patients didn't accept this coup d'etat of the BC bud industry, and they fought the Harper government in court. They were granted an injunction in March, meaning that they can still grow their own medicine according to the old regulations. But of course, the Harper government has appealed this injunction, not to mention any new patients must be registered under the new program. Now, the next court date for this is scheduled for February of 2015, and hopefully the new regulations are shut down and medical cannabis users will be free to continue to grow their own medicine. Number 6, the Ebola Scare. Liberian Thomas Duncan died at a Dallas hospital from Ebola this past October, and as a nurse went traveling on an airplane with the Ebola virus as well. Now, the fear-mongering was in full force with Ebola this season, and as I stated in my video report, it's not enough to just have the flu anymore. Every season, the establishment likes to promote 2 pandemics. They like to promote the flu vaccine, and this year, well, the Ebola vaccine. But it's not just the establishment that has been benefiting from the Ebola scare. I'm sure that there are those in the field of independent media who made quite a bit of money off of their natural healthcare products. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of these products are great and can be very useful, but listening to some of this Ebola coverage was just downright painful. Is the goal to spread the truth or to spread fear? Now, sometimes, obviously, the truth is scary, but considering that Ebola has not caused a massive die-off of the human race, and in fact, a Massachusetts doctor has actually been cured of the latest manifestation of the virus, well, then it's clear to me that this fear-mongering was probably more about selling products than it was about telling the truth. It's quite sad, really, and I certainly hope that this trend does not continue right on into 2015. Number 5, the torture report. Another torture report was released that showed just how deranged these intelligence agencies are. But people seem to be more offended that Sony wasn't showing the new stoner comedy, The Interview. It seems that most Americans are okay with torture, but not with letting North Korea censor Hollywood. Although, as the facts are coming in, it is looking more now like this is just a marketing gimmick and an excuse for the White House to just demonize North Korea. American military aggression has increased this year, and it does every year. I'm sure that starting a conflict in North Korea is on the agenda. They are, after all, part of the axis of evil, and Hollywood, of course, is the propaganda division of the military-industrial complex. Number 4, the Bundy Ranch standoff. In the spring, we saw Americans counter the globalist tyranny in Nevada. The Bundy Ranch is one of the few remaining pieces of private property in the state of Nevada. And when the federal government tried to take Bundy's land, well, they were met with a great deal of resistance by the American people. And I think people may have underestimated just how close the US actually came to open rebellion. These protesters didn't show up with signs and bullhorns. They showed up with guns. And fortunately, the American police didn't fire on these people, but the issue is certainly far from over. Number 3, corrupt police and the Ferguson riots. Cops killing people, investigating themselves, and then finding nothing wrong was a big theme in 2014. as well as 2013, and I'm sure it's going to continue to be an issue right on into 2015. A Quebec City man violated some random bylaw on his bicycle. The result? Well, he was hit by a police car and pinned down for an arrest despite the fact that he was bleeding to death. Of course, the Quebec police have investigated themselves into the matter, and not only did they find no wrongdoing, but the man who actually hit the cyclist has now, in fact, been promoted. Ferguson, Missouri received its fair dose of a police state this year. Starting in August with the murder of Michael Brown, the protests continue to this day. Now, Ferguson highlights some major issues. First and foremost is the militarization of the police. Even soldiers have criticized police handlings of weapons. And in this famous picture, we have militarized cops pointing a gun at a presumably innocent bystander. Even soldiers admit that one doesn't aim unless one plans to shoot. See, this is part of the problem with militarized cops. Not only does it smack in the face of what a free society is supposed to look like, but these cops really have no idea of how to properly use these weapons. Another issue is with the so-called protesters themselves. Violence and the destruction of private property does not solve anything. In fact, if anything, it serves the interest of the state, since they can then turn around and say, see how violent these protesters are? That's why we need militarized police. See, they want this to be about black versus white, when really it's about the state versus you and I. I can only hope that the police start disobeying their orders, because without the coercive arm of the police and the military, well, Washington, D.C. has nothing. And without the obedience of their police lapdogs, there is nothing to keep Americans from ignoring the commands of D.C. and, for that matter, nullifying unconstitutional laws. Number 2, Canadian terror plots. A deranged man calling himself a member of ISIS ran over 2 Canadian soldiers with his car, killing one of them. The police killed the driver on the spot before he could be arrested and questioned. And just days later, on October 22nd, it is alleged that Michael Zihov Bibo fatally shot Corporal Nathan Cirillo, a Canadian soldier on ceremonial central duty at the War Memorial. Bibo then entered the nearby center block at Parliament building at Parliament Hill, where a shootout occurred, ending in his death. Now, in the aftermath of this event, we here at Press for Truth have submitted Access to Information Act requests in an effort to get all of the information that we can on this. But CSIS and the RCMP are playing very, very hard to get. And despite one RCMP officially saying that they might release Bibo's manifesto, well, the RCMP quickly retracted that statement. And they now have no intention of releasing either the manifesto or unedited footage from Parliament. And that's a big issue. We know that false flags happen. And obviously the Harper government, as well as the whole globalist establishment, have used the Ottawa shooting to further their agenda. Full access to all of the footage and information on Bibo will help to clear up many of these questions that are surrounding this event. But until we can actually get access to that information, I just simply can't sit here and tell you that it's 100% a false flag. That would just be dishonest of me. And when I named this organization Press for Truth, I meant it. And then, of course, there's Justin Bourque. The small, quiet city of Moncton, New Brunswick made international news this past June when the 24-year-old Justin Bourque shot 5 RCMP officers, killing 3 of them. A manhunt was launched with all of the latest technological gadgets and militarized police equipment, but it was Bourque himself who ended up turning himself in just a little after midnight on June 6th, announcing that, "I'm done." And unlike many shooters, Bourque didn't kill himself, and the police didn't kill him either. He's actually since been arrested and put on trial, which is going to continue into next year. And a recent picture of Bourque shows that he was beaten up in jail, most likely by the police, You don't have to be an expert to realize that cop killers don't necessarily get the best treatment when they're in jail. Now, this was Moncton's first homicide since 2010, and of course, this event has been used by the establishment to promote gun control, despite the fact that Justin's guns were bought legally. And the number one story this year, of course, is ISIS. Financed and trained by the US to fight Assad in Syria, this jihadist group is now taking over parts of Iraq and Syria. And despite how prior interventions created ISIS, the call has been for more intervention to fight ISIS. One definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Until somebody can explain rationally why more military intervention is going to solve the problems of prior military intervention, then the arguments for fighting ISIS just make no sense whatsoever. Of course, it's not so complicated when you realize that Middle Eastern destabilization has been the globalist plan for a long time now, and that Rothschild-run oil companies are now fully operational in Iraq. You follow the money and you will discover the truth. Well, those are the stories that caught my eye this year. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and comment on what you guys think were the biggest stories of 2014. And as for 2015, we've certainly got some big things in the works for PFT out here in British Columbia. As I mentioned, we're here building our own studio right now in an effort to increase the content and the production value of our videos on a daily basis. And of course, I'm going to continue to release my work for free right here on YouTube as always, but we do rely on your support through donations and also subscriptions at pressfortruth.ca and patreon.com/pressfortruth. So please check out the links in the description to see where you can help support independent media. And as we move into 2015, let's counter the propaganda of the mainstream media and continue to smash that pyramid one brick at a time. So that's all for this year, folks. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to keep up to date with everything that we're doing. And don't forget to show your support for independent media by signing up as a member at pressfortruth.tv and also patreon.com/pressfortruth. And keep fighting the good fight, my friends. Stay tuned to Press for